Please welcome Sterlin Lujan, an accomplished author, futurist, public speaker, nomad, and crypto anarchist. With over 8 years in the crypto industry and 15 years writing about anarchist political ideas and technology, Sterlin is a prominent voice in advocating for absolute freedom and compassionate anarchy. He is the author of Dignity and Decency, Rhapsodic Musings of a Modern Anarchist, work promoting the abolition of governments and the realization of individual sovereignty. Sterlin has contributed his expertise to major crypto businesses like Bitcoin.com and the Status Organization, and is a seasoned speaker at major tech events such as Block Show, Texas Bitcoin Conference, Narcopolco, The Greater Reset, discussing topics from voluntarism to the future of technology. Welcome, Sterlin.
Yo, June, thanks so much. We're really happy to be here with you, brother.
Okay. Yeah, I always like starting this series off by asking, how did you get into crypto, or when did you first hear about it? Did you believe in it early on, or did it take some time for you to believe in it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm going to give the little bit of a longer version to elucidate this situation because it's an interesting story. And I've written about it quite a bit. There's pieces of it in my book, not the whole story. So back in roughly 2009, I was arrested for possession of MDMA and cocaine by the local government in Texas and state government, and with assistance of the city government. I had about 400 pills of MDMA. And as a result of that, I thought that I was going to go to prison for a long time. They actually threatened me with 40 years in prison. And I was lucky enough to hire the most hardcore attorney in the city. And I was lucky specifically because the drugs that were in my house didn't go outside the state and become a federal crime, or the issue would have been a whole lot different. Now you're probably wondering, how does this have to do with currency in the blockchain ecosystem? This was really a transformative experience in my life. That occurred. Had to go through the whole legal system. It took a year to go to court, during which there was a lot of fear and concern and a lot of really sleepless nights. Luckily, that because I did hire that attorney, I ended up with probation instead of getting prison time. It ended up being 10 years of probation. I got off of probation in 5 years, and it was deferred adjudication, so there's no criminal charge actually on my background. But during that process, I had started asking, when that happened, I started asking serious questions. I was just engaging in market activity. I didn't hurt anybody. Everything that I did was consensual. How is what I did, how does that deserve a prison sentence? How does that deserve some type of punishment? So I started reading and looking into this on a deeper level, and I discovered the anarchists, especially from the voluntarist perspective, largely Murray Rothbard. I read his book, For a New Liberty, during this time. I think I read it actually while I was awaiting trial. And then around the same time, the Ron Paul Levolution was cropping up. So I read all of Ron Paul's book, In the Fed, The Revolution, really illuminating stuff. So I realized that there had already been all of these people out who had these really systematic and consolidated views on what the state actually is as a parasitic organization, as an organization that's hell-bent on trying to control society. And so that reading that plus that experience changed me and changed who I was. So that, as a series of events, of course, I started reading online and engaging with the anarchist community. And this was up until teen, when I was really just engaging in forums and chatting and posting on Reddit. And I came into contact with a group calling themselves cypherpunks and crypto anarchists. And it was through that experience and through that engagement online that I started to learn about Bitcoin. I first heard about Bitcoin through these cypherpunk communities in 2009. And I thought, wow, this is an actual powerful, sorry, it was 2013. This is an actual powerful way to start changing society, to undermine the status quo, and to perhaps create a freer future. So I dove right into everything crypto around that time. I started talking about it, but I didn't really put my money where my mouth was until around 2015. I traveled to PorkFest, and at PorkFest, I had the opportunity to use Bitcoin at their so-called Agora Valley. So I made some purchases for t-shirts. I bought food. I used Bitcoin. This was when Bitcoin was actually usable as cash, right? I purchased all kinds of stuff. And I went back to my wife and I said, we're going full in to Bitcoin. It was at that time that I also started working in the space, started working with Bitcoin.com, as you mentioned, and also the Steemit platform, which was a blogging platform where you could earn cryptocurrency rewards for writing posts. I started writing my libertarian and anarchist sentiments there and did really well on Steemit and ended up trading that for Bitcoin. So that's the story. I had an awakening experience by having to deal with the criminal justice system, and that led me to understand, or to come into contact with Bitcoin and then try to understand how it is related, how crypto is related to helping create and build a freer world. So that's the story of how I got into it, which is pretty, I'd say pretty hardcore, maybe even a little uncharacteristic in some ways, but I think similar to other people's stories in the space.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't realize your whole story, and that goes back to 2009. Wow, and because you're a prolific writer. I've been involved in the libertarian community since the Ron Paul days in 2008, 2012. So, but I thought it was, I didn't realize your story was like coincided with that timeline as well. It was like, and since you seem to have built your name recognition in the community pretty rapidly from that time. And for those that aren't maybe familiar with, let's say, libertarianism or anarchy, what's your definition for just people that are just might think of it as in different ways, right? So
yeah, sure. So anarchism really just means without rulers, and meaning without, the prefix and without, archos, rulers, so without rulers. But the term has really gotten bastardized and has a lot of connotations applied to it in the modern age, where people think anarchy means disorder and chaos and bloodshed in the streets and some punk rocker in black leotards and a mohawk who's going to toss a Molotov cocktail into grandmother's window on a moment's notice. But that's really not what an anarchist is. Sure, there are those sects of anarchists because the term can be delivered quite broadly, right? But for the most part, anarchists are people who just want to be without rulers. Now, the way that they go about that is quite differentiated, but I would say that most modern day anarchists don't seek violence as the solution to the problem.
yeah, sounds good. That's a good way to put it. So, and from your, let's say from a philosophical standpoint, how do you describe Bitcoin to those?
Yeah, so I think
How is it consistent with the philosophy?
yeah, this is an interesting question, and it's actually quite complicated because I think in some ways Bitcoin has changed, right? At least the perspective of it has changed over time. But we're just going from when I got into Bitcoin in the early days. So my perception of Bitcoin as a philosophical tool for undermining state power was the fact that it is in both an immutable ledger and a money with a limited supply. Right. One of the characteristics of government money is that these guys in some office can press a button and print out as much money as they want. Right. They can hyperinflate the currency and at the same time devalue the currency and cause prices to rise. Right. That's effectively the definition of inflation. And Bitcoin as a tool, you can use it as money, and it's disinflationary because there's only going to ever be 21 million units that are produced, and they're produced in accordance to an algorithm that was created to behave in a similar way as gold mining, where you are able to make a lot at the beginning, right? Because you found the mine, you're mining, and then over time, the amount that's produced slowly starts to decline. In the nomenclature of Bitcoin, this is called the halving. So every 4 years, the rewards that are created or mined from Bitcoin are reduced, are halved. So I think that characteristic or that feature makes Bitcoin itself a currency or an original currency that is antithetical to why governments use currency. And let's just be clear, these guys want to be able to print out as much as they want. They want to be able to create as much as they want because they want to be able to fund massive warfare. They want to be able to fund a surveillance state. They want to be able to put a bunch of people in prison, and they want to effectively have power over the whole of society so they can surveil society and can control society. So that's why Bitcoin, at least in its original incarnation, was geared and developed to be a monetary weapon, so to speak, that's antithetical to the state apparatus.
Okay. Yeah, that's also great. So when you say, I guess, originally, and you see how it's being institutionalized right now with the Bitcoin ETF, is that in your view, a good thing or bad thing? And then also from more of a geopolitical level, you have El Salvador adopting Bitcoin as one of their national currencies, right? So what do you think of what's going on today? What were your kind of visions earlier? How has it maybe changed with things that have gone on today?
Yeah, this, like I said, this is definitely a longer conversation. I'm happy to have it. It's because it's really interesting. I think I'm not, first of all, I want to mention that I'm not a coin maximalist by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not for one particular coin to rule them all. And I think that innovation in the space is really important. But I will say this, to me, it looks like Bitcoin has, at least in the modern day, been hijacked. Parts of it has been hijacked. The initial vision for Bitcoin as that monetary weapon, it was supposed to be peer-to-peer electronic cash. That vision has not become fulfilled as time has passed. And as a matter of fact, it looks like it's been purposely sabotaged and handicapped, right, for various reasons. One is the technology has not fulfilled that dream of cash because the block size wasn't expanded, right? We're all familiar with the 2015 16, what they call the block size wars, which we could get into the whole discussion of Roger Ver and his promotion of Bitcoin as cash, which that's the way that Satoshi envisioned it in the white paper, as peer-to-peer electronic cash. And in order to be used as cash, Bitcoin has to be as cheap as possible in terms of the fee structure. Right now, if you send Bitcoin from one person to another on the base layer, it's prohibitively expensive for most people. You can't. Everyone jokes around about the idea of being able to buy your coffee with Bitcoin, and that was the intended use case, in my opinion. But that largely didn't come to fruition. Everyone talks about the Lightning Network and other layer 2 solutions as being the way that Bitcoin will become cash. But those are ultimately just centralized Visa 2.0 networks, right? Where there's a lot of risk and there's a lot of attack vectors. Those aren't necessarily great, in my personal opinion, for the usability of Bitcoin as cash. And to me, you mentioned the Bitcoin ETF, BlackRock's involvement, the fact that a lot of the Bitcoin developers are also hired on by BlackRock. There's deeper conspiracy theories that Roger wrote about in his book, Hijacking Bitcoin, that he released recently. This idea that there's some connection to Bilderberg and some of these other global conspiratorial groups. I won't delve into all that because I don't really think it's directly relevant. Just to say that it looks like if Bitcoin can be turned into a plaything for the elite and basically simply securitized in the sense that it's just managed as an ETF on these financial markets, these traditional markets, then it's not being used for its killer application use case, which was as cash for the world. So I think there certainly has been at least some hamstringing of Bitcoin as a tool. And to me, that makes sense, right? Because governments don't want actual money to exist and be floating around for ease of use and ease of adoption in society, because that definitely hampers their plans for maintaining control, hegemonic control over society and over currencies. So anyway, that's at least the way that I've started to view the particular situation. I think there are a lot of other cryptos out there that are way more useful, such as Bitcoin Cash, right? Way more useful as a currency, and even things like Litecoin are better, probably because they don't have the same network capacity as Bitcoin. But still, a lot of other better cash use cases out there right now than Bitcoin, which is a shame because it's really put us behind so far in helping bring crypto to the world as cash, right? That's supposed to be the killer application for crypto, for pushing society forward, and for undermining these centralized apparatuses of control and this notion of disintermediating these systems and creating more of the cypherpunk vision or dream that we've been trying to achieve. So I know that's a lot to unpack, but that's the start of my thoughts.
Yeah, that's an interesting, definitely. I can understand that perspective. But there are, like, just to maybe counter that a little bit, there's a lot of the Austrians have been gold bugs, right? And so the idea of a digital gold seems like a powerful thesis to say, hey, gold goes up when governments inflate. And so if Bitcoin starts to replace that and have actually additional advantages over gold, it seems as though a lot of people are happy to have that alternative, even as a store of value, right? Not so much day to day, which hopefully, like the other layer 2 technologies you mentioned and Lightning can help with that. But even just as a store of value, even for governments like El Salvador to be at a more equal footing than they would have been having to depend on, let's say, the dollar. For those, I think, aspects, what do you think? What do you think of that? And it's interesting too. You're involved in it. A lot of people got stuck and I was one of them, that gold was the only real money. And that was the other kind of, I think, philosophy within more of the freedom circles. So it was actually hard for me to Bitcoin because of that. So anyways, any thoughts on those two ideas?
Yeah, and I want to be clear too that I'm definitely not a tribalist, right? Along with my anti-maximalist mindset. There's a lot of people in the traditional Bitcoin community that I respect who just primarily focus on Bitcoin and are maximalist, people like Bruce Fenton, who's a hardcore cypherpunk, but his main thoughts are along the lines of Bitcoin and its potential to disrupt the status quo, especially as either cash or a digital store of value. With that disclaimer, I do think that there is that gold-based use case that can be disruptive to the powers that be. I certainly wouldn't discount that, but I do see there is a potential flaw in that position if indeed the majority of the Bitcoin holdings are actually held by the likes of BlackRock, Grayscale, MicroStrategy, if all these mainstream financial companies are the ones holding all of the Bitcoin, and then everyone's or the majority of people's access to that asset class to Bitcoin is really facilitated by the centralized organization. And so in that sense, it's all fake because these people don't actually own Bitcoin. They own the ETF that is actually ultimately all owned by these institutionalized, centralized conglomerate organizations. I would not say that's in the best interest of Bitcoin for undermining the status quo as it currently stands. Maybe there's room where it plays out differently, and somehow just because Bitcoin is still that digital gold storage, maybe more and more people start to consider that this is still better to hold regardless than cash. Maybe there is something that can transpire that's where it can still prove its cypherpunk value. But I'm skeptical to say the least, especially as how things have turned out. I try not to be the Debbie Downer, and I try to work with people regardless of their particular perspective on which coin matters or not, because ultimately at the end of the day, what matters is the philosophy and the ideas. What matters is helping to change and re-augment society. But it really is a good intellectual exercise for us to talk about these ideas and talk about what technological attributes and characteristics really will help shape the future of the world, right? Because right now things don't seem to be going too great for us guys in crypto, right? With the recent arrest of Roger Ver, Samurai Wallet guys, those guys got arrested, the Tornado Cash verdict with Pertsiv, all kinds of stuff we can talk about in that realm. But so my whole big thesis has been we need to do whatever we can to band together and stop being so tribal and stop doing as much infighting and figure out a way how we can try to push back.
Yeah, let's just touch on that. I was trying to go a little chronologically, but yeah, just because it's been in recent news, it seems as though the regulators and governments are trying to crack down unfairly on crypto founders and technology, right? These are developers that try to promote open access, open systems, and all of a sudden they're being attacked in a way. So what are your thoughts? Yeah, so what's going on? What's your view on it? What's going on in the industry overall?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things that are transpiring. And the first one, or the main one, is that a large anti-crypto sentiment that is mainly, especially in recent months, by the Biden administration in the United States, and probably also some global powers and some nonprofit organizations, different institutions, but I think it's largely by the US government and the Biden administration, has a hardcore anti-crypto stance. And they've been pushing that stance by now finally trying to do whatever they can to shut down crypto growth and development in the US, especially as it pertains to this idea of privacy or privacy enhancing technologies. And I want to be clear that this is not something that's new. Government administrations have largely been antagonistic toward crypto for a long time. There was a thing called, some people probably haven't heard of it, Operation Choke Point 2.0. Just a little bit of background. Operation Choke Point 1.0 was a kind of a backroom government scheme to prevent, this was in the 90s and early 2000s, from newly formed MSBs or money services businesses like, and a lot of the broker dealers in local cities from doing business. So what the governments did is try to claim to their banking friends that these are sketchy businesses that we can't allow to operate. So what they would do is they would debank these businesses, right? So they don't have to actually use law. They can just use backroom pressure and tell their bankers what to do without even having clear regulations in place to shut them down, right? If they don't like them. So the same thing is happening in crypto in Operation Choke Point 2.0. And a similar thing has happened to the cannabis industry and any industries that are deemed as not moral or undignified or whatever reason that they give for not liking them. So that has really just reached its apotheosis in right now as more and more entrepreneurs, developers, and engineers have pushed forward strong tech with strong privacy guarantees. These guys certainly don't like that because they have an expectation of full monetary transparency. They don't believe in privacy at all. They think that every single transaction should be KYC'd, should be seen, and should be there for everyone to view and to surveil. And anyone who even tries to develop these kind of technologies is potentially going to be in their crosshairs. And that's what we've seen happen with the most recently, the Samurai wallet developers. And for anybody who's unfamiliar, Samurai wallet is a Bitcoin, is a crypto wallet, Bitcoin specifically, that has a coin join mixer built into it, which is a decentralized protocol. And so what people can do is mix in their Bitcoin through this mixer, and it changes the output, what's called the UTXOs. And the output is basically, it obfuscates where that Bitcoin came from, right? So it's mixed in with a bunch of people's Bitcoin, and then the output is all the same for all the users on the other end of that. And that makes it very difficult to trace back the original source of funds for the Bitcoin. And which is really sad about this whole thing is they're claiming that, and we'll just stick specifically for a minute to the Samurai wallet case, they're claiming that the Samurai wallet developers were operating an unlicensed money transmission business, and they were purposely flouting the United States and the FinCEN financial regulations in terms of knowing who their customers are. But what's crazy about it is it's just a wallet. It's not an actual business. They might have had some funds algorithmically routed to them to help pay for services and support Samurai wallet, but I still wouldn't count that as a money service business. So there's like some blurring of the legal definitions, I think, here. And this is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer, but I do think that that's a stretch. And to me, it just looks like an attack, a purposeful attack with I want to say there's a bit of a vindictiveness to it, to go after developers for developing software that gets funds. The goals, I think, are clear, and that's to either two things here: to pave the way for completely transparent digital transactions, or to pave a way for a potential CBDC, or central banking digital currency, for the banks and the US government to start spreading around. So it's basically destroying the opposition and any kind of competition, and allowing for the flourishing of fully transparent, surveilled, KYC'd, non-privacy currency that's completely and utterly controlled by the United States government. And anyone who's involved in creating a privacy tool is, again, really important to mention, is an absolute target for these guys to go after. And they will bend the rules if they have to try to take these people down. And that's unfortunately, what happened to these guys at Samurai Wallet.
Yeah, that's sad to see in the industry. And so what are your thoughts what are your recommendations to fight back and just defend against these attacks? What's the best thing? Get involved in politics and lobby, or what can you do? And especially if you're a builder too. So maybe builders are not even thinking about that. I think you'd almost want to avoid, just for practical purposes, right, doing this and do things outside. Maybe the US is a common strategy, just start outside the US. But yeah, what do you do from more of a, let's say, political standpoint of just trying to help and defend against these attacks? And then also, if you're a builder, what are a few recommendations you'd give?
Yeah, let's start with the builder scenario, the builder case. And I want to reiterate again that I'm not an attorney. I have worked in risk management before, that is, as well as I do it. And it's interesting because I'm glad I did that, because I got to learn a whole lot. One of the most important things that you can do if you're a builder, I'm a huge fan of the idea of exiting these regimes of control. So the first thing, and the most important is, and this is always in a lot of cases, and we can talk about them, it's the main reason why the US was able to go after certain individuals and certain companies. It's because they had US customers in their business. So if you have a US customer base in your business, you expose yourself to all of the financial laws that the United States puts into practice. And the US, as we know, is one of the most aggressive about going after people who commit quote unquote financial crimes. And just as a aside, I think this is largely the case because the US wants to protect, this goes back to everything that we've been saying and that I've talked about. They want to protect their fiat hegemony, right? The dollar is the world reserve currency, and the power of the dollar and the power for those guys to print out as much as they want. So you need to definitely 100% not have US customers. If you're a builder of technology, you need to do what you can to block those folks, unless, and this is the only other thing that is becoming relevant, unless you have a mechanism by which that you can develop your technology, step completely back from it, and then also maintain total anonymity. let's just use Satoshi for an example, the creator of Bitcoin. If they knew who Satoshi was, he would 100% be in prison, 100%, because they would simply just claim, look how much money has been laundered through Bitcoin. And indeed, in accordance with their rules, a ton of money has been laundered through the Bitcoin ecosystem. So Satoshi would 100% be in prison. But luckily, Satoshi is completely anon. So if you're going to build tools or technologies, you need to do it as anonymously as possible, especially if you have an intent to piss off the powers that be and the status quo, or if you're building privacy enhancing or anon enhancing technologies. But one of the things that I recommend doing too, if you're in the space and you're questioning the system and you're concerned about what you're doing, look into organizations like what the DarkFi Squad and Amir Taki and what those guys are up to. He's developing privacy infrastructure. Those guys are building privacy infrastructure and privacy tech for developers to use as a shield as an anonymous shield against the system. And they're referring to this as the dark forest. So it's dark forest infrastructure that acts like a canopy that shields all eyes from their development work. Now, I want to be clear too that it's really difficult in the modern age to be completely anonymous until all of this infrastructure is developed, because even if you do go anon, if you make a mistake along the way in your operational security or OPSEC, then it's possible for guys to go after you. Just short story time, the case of Ross Ulbricht, right? Dread Pirate Roberts, Ross did a really good job of maintaining his anonymity from the majority of the time, actually all of the time that he ran the Silk Road. The one mistake that he made was really previous to the full scope of the Silk Road. That is on the shroomery.org, which is a website for growing psychedelic mushrooms. Shroomery, he had left a comment that also had his email in it, and a really intrepid IRS agent was able to trace back the comment to his original email, and that's how they de-anonymized Ross. Was just a coincidence of a security accident, right, or a security oversight that Ross had made. Even if you are trying to go full anon, you have the perfect setup. A lot of people are still connecting their accounts to Google, right? They have some kind of connection to Amazon, right? Or to some of these web services that are mainstream. If you have a connection to those in any way, it's very likely that you can be de-anonymized through some type of subpoena that a government could send. So you have to be really careful about your OPSEC. That's the one thing. Not having US customers and exiting the system, being outside of the US physically, is also an important step. Just like we know from Roger's case, they can go after you around the world, but you definitely don't want to make it easy on them by going to a U.S. vassal state or a U.S. puppet state like Spain, or pretty much most everywhere in the European Union. There are places that will definitely make it a lot more difficult for them to come after you. This might be a discussion that is beyond the scope of what we're talking about, but just getting outside of the U.S. and going to a place that doesn't have diplomatic ties with the U.S. is an important step. And I'll also just briefly mention that one of the things I work with the Logos status organizations right now. One of the things that we aspire to do is also help create infrastructure that will help facilitate and generate more privacy enhancing technologies. And I want to be clear too that with the government, what they try to characterize anybody who wants to be involved in privacy is as a criminal. But there's been a saying in crypto lately that privacy is normal. It's a human right. Correct. We should have the right to be privacy, or to be private in our financial transaction, our affairs, wherever we see fit. But they're trying to flip this on its head and basically say that privacy is wrong, and that if you're doing anything involved in privacy, you're a criminal. So that is the same thing that's applicable to the Samurai Wallet guys, right? And what's happened there. So I hope that's helpful. We can talk about more aspects of trying to navigate the system if you want.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's crazy to see. Even CZ, I'm like, he's from another country, and they're trying to grab him into the jurisdiction of the U.S. government, and people don't understand the law. That's typically not done where you're from another country and they can jail you. So I'm curious though, are you still doing kind of compliance work? Because that was the last time I spoke to you, you're doing a lot of compliance work. You helped us out a little bit with compliance, but is that kind of still, and what's your, you just maybe shared like a lot of your thoughts from that experience, but is that something you continue to do, or?
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up. No, not currently. I doubt that I would be talking as candidly as I am to you now if I was still doing compliance work. And I would probably be hard pressed to do that again. It would have to be for the right people. because the reason that I did it and the reason that I helped Ernesto out is I really wanted, and this is still true, I really want people to be able to build amazing things and do things within the context of the system, because it's still helpful. We are in a scenario, though, where when you do compliance, you're playing a game, right? Because there's rules to this game, and the rules of the game are the ones put down by the United States empire and all of their allies and their partners and their puppets. And so I really did that in order to help push our agenda as crypto people forward, to be able to put crypto in as many hands as possible, and to be able to have it used as cash. That was in our original vision. So that's the whole reason that I did this, and I learned about it. But it also taught me an extremely valuable lesson. And this is when you asked this question, I thought this was really important. No matter if you're playing by their rules, if you're following all the rules, if you're doing everything right, you have a perfect compliance regime, you have your risk management scheme, you have your channel management, everything is up to par, you have your suspicious activity reporting program in place, it does not matter. That's what I'm going to say, right? This is the biggest insight I had. It does not matter. They will come after you anyway. They'll do it through this backroom pressure. They'll bury you in paperwork. They'll make your business so difficult to run that you eventually just have to shut down, unless you sell your soul to the devil. Right, you become a mega corporation. You have back doors. You have your KC policies. You're part of you're part of the surveillance state and the surveillance regime and the surveillance apparatus. You can't. So even if you technically are part of their surveillance apparatus by playing by their rules, if you're not very clearly doing whatever they say, no matter what, then they're not going to like you. If you're doing things that still they don't like, even if it's subtle, they'll still come after you. So it doesn't matter if you follow their rules, unless you're their corporate partners, fully corporatized, and you've fully sabotaged all of your customers. Yeah, so I think that is a losing game. And I think even to do that role, it's really risky on the individual's part. This was the biggest thing about doing compliance roles. If you're the compliance officer, you take a lot of personal responsibility for anything that goes wrong. So they can throw you personally in jail. To me, that's not right at all, especially if you're doing whatever you can to try to do the right thing, which is everything that we did at Crypto Space and we had continued to do. And of course, why we can talk about this stuff and why I have the experience to say that it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They just hate crypto, right? Unless you're willing to play full ball with them. And when I say that, I don't know the full extent of what that entails, but I just feel like there's definitely some murky stuff going on when it comes into the corporatized world of crypto trading.
Yeah, I think that's practical advice too. I think, yeah, I'm not surprised. It's almost like is it almost expecting them to play by the rules? Like they're like, they control the game, and they're gonna do what they have the power to do, and without. So it's unfortunate. I do think, though, the legal system, the U.S. legal system, is something that is at least somewhat independent that you can eventually utilize. And you had the luxury of finding someone for your case in Texas, which this fantastic story. Come from the outside, you would think, oh, hey, like that. How did you be able to get out of that situation with that light of a sentence, which is fantastic to hear. But yeah, so the legal system, I do think, is something I appreciate about the U.S. But from a practical sense, yeah, everything that you say, I think, yeah, it's tough. And that's why we try to do everything outside of the US and not take US customers, and just very careful about those kinds of things. So I think that's a good stopping point. Any other kind of thoughts or advice about this crypto industry that you can share, either to builders, maybe even investors? If you got to share any kind of stories that you have throughout your journey in crypto, just any other pieces of advice you'd like to share with others?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, I got into a little bit of a debate with somebody in Twitter the other day, and the debate was around what is more important, purchasing power, this is like i.e. Bitcoin, or privacy. And a lot of the Bitcoin maximalists go with the idea that purchasing power is what's going to push everything forward. But I think things are changing. And I might have in the past said, yeah, that's 100% true. We want way more purchasing power than the US dollar can ever provide. But I made the case, what is the point of having infinite purchasing power if you are locked in a government cage? So one of the huge things has been, I think, try to not only involve yourself in the privacy and anonymity ecosystem, because I think it's going to be huge in a variety of different ways, but I also think that working to developing and investing in privacy-based infrastructure, also network state, or we didn't really get into this, but it's another conversation for another time, maybe another video we do, another stream. But autonomous political formations, network states, I think that all of that space is ripe for exploration, for development, for entrepreneurship. And I think that's where people should consider spending a lot of their time, especially as we start to see more people, companies and organizations exit from the United States.
Yeah, that's definitely a great topic. I look forward to having you back to discuss that. The network state, and Balaji's big on that. He wrote a book on the network state. But yeah, I think that's definitely a exciting area to explore more. So I really appreciate you coming on, and yeah, we'll have you back just to share thoughts on everything that's going on in this space and just even outside and the freedom movement, I would say. So, but yeah, really appreciate it. I hope you have a good day, and yeah, we'll have you back soon.
Bro, I really appreciate it. This was amazing. Thanks. And just one parting thought, if anybody wants to find my material or work, they can just go to sterlinlujan.com. Have my book on there as well, and any video content, written content, etc. Cool. Great to be here, June.
Sounds good. Yeah. Follow Sterlin, sterlinlujan.com. So appreciate it. Have a good one.
See you, man.